Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
Hello and welcome to Rock That Relationship. Tracy and I are here in this very interesting season on divorce and how to navigate the divorce process. And today we are pleased to bring on Billie Tarascio, who's an attorney and owner of Modern Law, to talk about really the navigating the divorce process by working with a lawyer, the legal pieces of it. This season is all about the legal, the emotional, the mental, the logistical processes. And today we're really getting kind of down into the heart of what it means to work with a lawyer. So Billie, thanks so much for being on with us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Billie. Oh, and full disclosure, Billie's my boss. I do work for her and for Modern Law, which is incredible. And she offers a lot of services besides just legal representation, and we'll get into that, but like an incredible service for the community you do.
Thanks, Tracy.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, maybe, Billie, you can start by telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do, but, even more interestingly, kind of how you became the owner of Modern Law. Like, how did you get to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah. So when I was in college, my parents went through a divorce, and I knew I was going to law school and had kind of that weird seat that sometimes young adults have when their parents get divorced, where they tell you a lot, right? You know a lot.
Because you're kind of adult, but yeah.
You're not living at home. You're not part of the divorce, but, obviously it's rocking your world. It really is. And I'll tell you, I've interviewed people who have said, they became divorce attorneys because they went through a divorce, and they were talking about their parents' divorce. So it's incredibly impactful. And so because of that, I knew I was going to law school, and I knew this is real life. This is real law. This is impacting people. I want to do family law.
And so did you just do family law straight out of law school?
Yes. So I went into law school knowing I wanted to do family law. I'm just
one of these people. This has been it, right?
Well, yeah. And I think I'm commitment prone, maybe. Mm-hmm. Like if I make a decision, I'm going to stick with the decision. And that's kind of the story of Modern Law. Modern Law started 15 years ago, but really even before that, in law school when I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, and I didn't want to do things. I didn't want to work for Big Law. I didn't want to do things the way these other lawyers were managing their structure. I didn't want that life. Mm-hmm. So then I was committed to making a life for myself and for my employees that was a whole lot more family centered.
Mm. Mm-hmm. So that's incredible, because a lot of people would say, oh, divorce, you just want to rip families apart, right? But that's not really what you're doing.
No, and no divorce attorney wants to rip families apart. If anything, our clients seem to get upset with us for not fighting harder. And the reason that happens is because we see divorce in your moment, in your fight, and 5 years later and 10 years later. And we know that the fight that is happening right now, the legal battle, can hurt your family in the future or set your family up for success. And we really don't want to destroy families.
It's incredible you said that, because we've talked to another person who was a family law litigator for 9 years and now has moved to collaborative, intuitive mediation. And she was saying, she felt that that's what she was doing, but she knew she was helping a lot of people. And that 5% or 10% of divorces should end up in court, but the rest can be settled or mediated. How do you feel about that?
It's really interesting you say that. So different states have different systems. I was talking recently with a lawyer from Utah, and in the Utah system, they funnel you to mediation. Those divorces almost never get in front of judges. And in Arizona, we get in front of judges a lot.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that as an attorney, right? Even though 90% of my cases settle, right? Before trial.
They do. They settle before that final trial, but
Mm-hmm.
we've often had a temporary orders hearing, and we've had status conferences, and we've had RMCs.
Right.
And I think every time you get into a courtroom, you're ratcheting up the stress
Mm-hmm.
and conflict. So if it can be avoided, you should try to avoid it.
I think that's a great thing for a divorce attorney and somebody who owns a law firm to say. Like, that's the truth. I mean, that's how I feel about it, right? Like, if you don't have to have a trial, if you don't have to go into these things, and I had no idea that different states are doing it differently, but to funnel right to mediation is so smart. I mean, there are just some people who are not going to be cooperative, right? Like there are personality disorder people that somebody was married to, and there's nothing you can do. And then you need a judge to step in, right? Or abuse of the children or abuse of the spouse, where a judge must step in.
I totally agree. There are cases where court is exactly what we need,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not true in the majority of cases.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, that kind of leads me to my first thought, my first question. So you have someone, a prospective client even comes to you and talks to you and, is interested in proceeding legally with, the lawyer route of the divorce. And, they sometimes don't exactly know how to articulate their ideal outcomes. And as you were saying, you're like looking ahead, right? You're looking 5 years, 10 years out. Some might come and say, my goal is to get as much money as I can, but really you talk to them and you find out like maybe the goal is really that they just want to get done with this very fast, or whatever it might be. So how do you help clients when they come in to figure out kind of what those goals are for them and what they would like to see? Because perhaps mediation is an option, or perhaps, I don't know a lot about the legal world, but, how do you help them kind of figure out deep down what it is that they also really want when they might not be able to tell you because they don't know themselves?
I agree with everything you're saying. And I think what usually happens is that people change what they want many times throughout the litigation process. When they come to us initially, they're in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
They're, if we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Mm-hmm.
their fundamental safety has been threatened.
Mm-hmm.
Their stability has been threatened. And so the goal at that moment is to find stability in the immediate right now.
Right.
How do I protect myself and my kids right now? And
Right.
that's what's most important. And that's our first job as lawyers. And then as we move on in the process, as we can take care of those safety needs, then we can move on to future planning.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I've said that exactly to a client who, an order of protection situation, and she had moved in with her parents and has the kids there, and she's feeling bad about that. And I'm like, look, you have to, like, you're surviving, right? Forget all the rest. Just let's deal with these things. Boom, boom, this piece, and the rest we will deal with later. But you have to, I think, not necessarily compartmentalize, but yes, hierarchy, right, of needs. What actually needs to happen here? And do you feel the lawyers are well set up to deal with that in general? Like to help clients with that? I mean, I think our firm particularly is. I think most of the lawyers are great at that.
I think, yes, when you start doing this for a while, it becomes pretty obvious. Your role as an advisor goes far beyond what does the law say about filing a petition for divorce or getting a temporary order. Your role as an advisor is, we're experts in what these people are experiencing. On multiple levels. I've now gone through a divorce. You've gone through a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So to have experienced it personally, experienced it many, many times with our clients, because that is what happens. When we are your lawyer, we're in a relationship with you. We are experiencing what you're experiencing from a different perspective, but
right.
We become absolute experts. And then our job is to take that expertise and that experience and help people navigate their situation as best they possibly can, understanding that this is their life and their choices and their story. And our job is simply to be a supporting character in that story.
Well, you're talking about all this idea about, the stability and the kind of the needs right away, and that, the advisory support is like very much needed, particularly at the beginning, but probably obviously throughout. How do you quell people's fears about the divorce process? A lot of them are scared for many different reasons. How do you help them? I mean, some of them may end up staying scared, but we actually, we've talked to other folks who say, as soon as I kind of learned more about the process, I felt less afraid. So how do you go about doing that?
I think everybody's different. There are some people who want to consume as much information as possible, and we have more resources that are educational than people have time to get through. We really, really do. So we've got online courses, we've got handouts, we've got books we give away. Like, there is so much information for people to consume if they are that person. And I think, I'm that person. Academics are that person. Like, anybody who's gone through college or grad school, like, you want to learn as much as you possibly can so that then you can follow directions.
Yeah,
but that's not everybody, right?
Yeah.
That's not everybody. Some people don't want to deal with it. They want to stick their head in the sand, and they want you to deal with it for them, which we can do to a certain extent.
Right.
But you have to tell us what you want. The hardest part as a divorce attorney is when you've got clients who don't know what they want. And then we can't come up with a strategy or execute a strategy unless the strategy is to wait, go to counseling, decide what we want. But that can be very frustrating for clients.
Well, it's interesting because I have a client who's either we're going to trial tomorrow, we're going to take the settlement offer this afternoon, right? And we started out 5 months ago with my advice of just leave the house, be done, and now we're at that point, but it's taken that long. It's taken swinging from here to there. And, I just put it in perspective to her. Okay, this is the process she had to go through. Like, we can't
absolutely
sour grapes about I didn't take the offer back then. I didn't do that. Okay, but we can't fight that, right? That's done. We are where we are. Let's get this done and move forward the best way. Do you want to go to trial and be re-traumatized, which for this particular client would be extremely re-traumatizing, or take this deal and just move on with your life, And I think that's something that's very important for lawyers. It is interesting because we talk about on this podcast a lot, like, there's the emotional aspect of a relationship, and then especially with a marital, this is a actual, legal contract, right? So how do you separate, okay, I have to deal with the emotional part, and then how do I deal with the legal part? And is a lawyer uniquely able to help with that or not able to help with that at all? Like, do we need to farm them out? I don't. But I do say, okay, now you need additional support, family, therapy, or whatever. But
I think it's part of our job. I don't think that we can help them legally without truly understanding where they're at emotionally. And just like you said, lawyers can get very frustrated because we can see the future, and so we can tell you what you should do right now.
Right.
And we're usually right, but it is not our life. It is not our call. Our job is to be as in the moment with them as they are, not to think, oh, remember when I told you that 4 months ago? Or we had this offer. We could have done this. So we are right here together in this moment, deciding right now in this moment what's best for you based on everything that's going on.
I think you're unique in that understanding, though, don't you? Based on my experience now, I have very limited experience compared to you in this arena. But my experience so far with opposing counsel has been like, oh my goodness, if only this opposing counsel we would be done with this much sooner, right? And so, and I'm finding levels of trauma in the relationship with opposing counsel that I'm like, oh my goodness, like there are some people that really, they didn't learn that. Maybe they didn't go through it in life. Maybe, you know what I mean? Law school, I don't know if you got that kind of training in law school about the person as an individual, like, you know what I mean? Like, right? People are people. And I was a cop before, and then I became a public defender, and I've had, people say I loved getting criminals off too much. And, I liked helping that person who was in a terrible position. Maybe their fault, maybe not, it's not that. And I think there's this perception about divorce attorneys as well, where there probably are some who are just money motivated or just whatever. I think what you said, though, is unique. And I think that I mean, do you disagree with me?
No, I think you're right. And, lawyers are competitive. We're achievement oriented. We want to win. And you want that in your lawyer. To a certain extent, you want a lawyer who's going to be able to go to bat for you and fight for you and be effective. And at the same time, we have to also put on the counselor hat, and the counselor realizes that they are simply a guide. And telling the person the answer of what they need to do isn't how the person actually gets there. The counselor knows that week after week, sitting in a chair. The lawyer gets very frustrated.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and that's got to be almost like competing interests, because in one sense you're like, oh, we need to move this. We do need to move this forward, but I also need to have you have your own process in that to honor you and how you show up, but sort of balancing that. So how do you balance that?
I don't know.
It depends with each client, right?
Right.
And it depends on the client and I think the pushiness of opposing counsel, or like, are there urgent needs here, right? Like, is there a parenting plan that needs to get done? Is there something else that has to happen? Like, they're going to sink or swim. If they don't sell this house, they're going to go bankrupt,
Right. Sometimes there's urgency and we have to push our clients. This is not the time to put your head in the sand. There's too much risk. And our job is also to evaluate the risk of waiting versus the risk of moving forward. And there becomes a time when, if you feel like you can't help somebody, you have to I say to them, I feel like I'm not the best fit. I feel like I'm not able to give you what you need, because my belief is we have to do A or B. Those are the options. And you would like to do C. And I don't feel like I can be effective if we do C.
How do people respond to that?
I mean, usually pretty well, because it's respectful. It's honest. And if our interests can't be aligned, if I don't feel like I can do any good for you, then I am wasting your money and I am wasting my time. And there's all these other people who need lawyers, who need help. So you should find a lawyer that can help you right now where you're at.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what do you do? So you say you do have someone who's like, we are a good fit. You're feeling really good about this. And this is kind of more of a logistical question, I think, for our listeners is, what can they expect in terms of coming and meeting with you? How do they prepare? What kinds of questions might they be asked by a lawyer? What kinds of paperwork or documents might they need to have access to kind of help at least organize the process a little bit better for a lawyer?
Yeah. So there are people who come in, with their checklists, the very prepared people who want to read everything and know what to do and then execute. And then there are, other people who don't work that way. And most of the time it's totally fine. No matter who you are, we will be able to communicate what we need and get what we need, but there is certain things that we need. I have had the gift of working with a client who has had a very significant TBI, and his capacity is incredibly limited. And it's a gift, because I've probably worked with other clients with limited capacity, but haven't had it in my mind at all times. This person has limited capacity, and I have to be patient, cognizant, and aware. And so with this client, it's such a gift, because I can tell him, I need your bank accounts, and I really can't expect him to go in and pull 3 years of statements. He does not have the capacity to do it. And I think a lot of our clients probably at that time are experiencing a diminished capacity where they can go get this information. But what they can give me is their username and their password. And I can log in on their behalf and sit with them on the phone and get the 2-factor authentication and then do the downloads for them.
That's very interesting. Wow. And I do think that a lot of those people are diminished. They're in terror. They're like in fight or flight. Right. They're
it's
just
for a different reason.
Right.
It's not the TBI, but it doesn't matter. They're still unable to access the places in their brain that they would need to be able to execute, the executive functioning required to go gather all this data for us may not be there. Right. And there's no reason we can't do it for them.
Have you ever read The House of Sand and Fog?
No.
Have you seen the movie? Oh, they made us read that book at the first day of law school. We had to have it read for orientation. I went to Jesuit law school in Seattle, and it's one of the most traumatizing books I've ever read, and stories. And it's about the human in a legal action, right?
Yes.
And all of the different parts. You should read it. I won't ruin it for you, but it's incredible. And that's why they made us read it, to not forget about the human. And that the human, when confronted by like a lot of these issues, be it, marital issues, be it like, you're going to lose your house or whatever, they go in, it's like they become catatonic, and I was telling like Corey earlier, yesterday I had to do my taxes, and I was like, walking around the house like, okay, I'll do it. And like I had to get myself like worked up. I'm like, I better have a snack first. I better give myself a treat. No, I better walk the dogs. I better do this. Just do it. And by the time I did it, it turned out well for me. And it was like no trauma. And I was like super happy. But I was so sick. Like I was like, I can't do it. And I think it's really helpful to have a lawyer who understands that, like what you're going through.
I agree.
And to find family support. This is a question I have for you that it's good to have family support, but sometimes family's too involved. I've seen this with a couple parents where it's just too much. Like, this is an adult who's getting divorced and they really need to take control. Have you seen that at all?
Absolutely. And I feel like the third parties, whether it's the boyfriend or the girlfriend or the parents, they almost have to be handled, which I know is condescending, in the same way that the client has to be handled. They are having their own journey. They are having their own grief over the breakup and over the impacts that breakup is having on their kids and their grandkids. And I think the best thing you can do is kind of indulge them.
Interesting. We're opposite.
Yep. Yeah.
I have an opposite philosophy
about
that. Well,
right, because we want them out. That's the goal. We want them out.
They're not helpful. I mean, sometimes they're helpful some are very helpful. And I've had clients where their father, grandfather, whatever's been there, and it's been like such a source of help to that person. And then I've had an overbearing, relative. And I think it's so important for clients to get help. But ultimately, this is their life. It's their decision. They're going to have to be the co-parent, and they need to take control. And I do think that's something lawyers can really help with, is like, this is your life now. This is your life, right? And your life just changed drastically, and you have to understand that. I've told clients that, like, this is different. I also tell clients that it's like, I think a minimum of 2 years to recover, like financially, emotionally, and physically, even from a simpler divorce. Do you see that?
I mean, yes. I have heard 3 years. I think sometimes it can even be longer. And I don't mean like, if we go back to the hierarchy of needs, I mean really getting like to a place of stability and peace. I don't mean like, yes, you can get yourself new housing, and yes, you can make sure that you have enough food, and yes, you can even have new friends, but like for your whole family to readjust to the new norm takes a while.
Well, and I'm kind of going back to that idea of the third party, and then kind of phasing into the adjustment. Even what I've seen on a personal note is even not even just breakups, but separations in which there are like division of assets and things, is sometimes that third party or those third parties, those friends, those well-intentioned people are kind of screaming in your ear, go for the jugular, and I've seen it where I've had friends who were in the middle of an amicable divorce, and it ratcheted up because the people around them were sort of cheerleading for them to kind of stick it to their ex. And I think about how, gosh, this could have been faster, easier, and better for everyone. But sometimes these other people sort of they think they're being helpful. They think they're championing and being this like ally, but in turn, it just sort of kind of goes off the rails a little bit. I don't know, in terms of those people coming into like actual meetings with you, but just in general, I've seen it where people are feeding this stuff in the ears.
And it's like all the work we're doing to be an advisor is being undone by another advisor. And at that point, I need everybody in the same room. I need to get that other advisor on our team. We cannot be on different teams. And they don't have the expertise we have. They don't have the legal knowledge they have. Like, they're not in as good of a position as we are to provide information and advice. However, they may have other perspectives that we don't have that we can incorporate. So, so validating, what they have to offer, and then also helping them understand why it is that we are advising this direction and the consequences to the family if we don't.
Well, that's something I think is important. Corey actually went through with her parents like a really messy, long, hostile divorce, right? My parents are still married, but I've been divorced. And there was really nobody and I walked away, right? We've talked about this before. I didn't want the fighting, right? Would I like the money now? Sure. But like, I don't like to fight. I really don't, unless it's something terrible like abuse or something like that. And how can you help that person to kind of push those people out? Like, just, okay, focus with me and this is what you need to do.
I mean, the problem is they are now managing difficult relationships from multiple angles. That is a horrible thing. And I think they need to kind of realize that. And the third party, if you can bring them in, like, we can't have another enemy here. We can't have somebody taking away from the path forward, and the end goal being, and I think it's so important to just constantly go to that long term. Our end goal here is, and whatever it is, it might be that, it might be that you've moved across the country. It might be that your family has found its new norm. And the best new norm, if you've got two decent parents, is that they can talk to each other and sit next to each other during a basketball game. That's your best case scenario.
Yes.
And so are the choices we're making right now conducive to that or not?
I like that analogy because I think about my parents when they got divorced, they were never at the same function together, except for I think it was my college graduation, and I don't even think they sat near each other. And I noticed that. And so when I split with my ex, we had a domestic partnership, so we had a dissolution of that. So it wasn't a divorce, but my gosh, it was very complicated.
Yeah.
And we have a child, and at first we weren't sure about how, like, do we sit next to each other at the school play? And then really our goal has been almost exactly word for word what you've said, is we want to be able to be at functions together and not just visibly sitting next to each other, but talking and laughing and supporting and, those kinds of things, so that there's a unified kind of connection in a front. So, because my daughter had made a comment at one point that when she looked out to the audience in the school play, she had to look at one side of the theater and see one set of, like, her family and her other family on the other side of the theater. And that just, like, it was like a stab in the heart. It was like that. I don't want that. And that to me was like, all of a sudden centered her in a way that just shifted the entire energy of everything.
Yeah. I mean, if we can just get back to, like, what do I want for my children? That's kind of, if there are kids involved, that's usually the most important question. What do I want for my children? And then am I setting myself up? And, like, that doesn't always mean you cave.
Right.
Part of am I doing what's best for my children is, am I setting myself up financially and physically in a way that allows me to support them? That's okay. I'm not saying you cave at everything, but I am saying you disengage from things that don't matter, that you can let go.
Or things that are causing more suffering. And, I talk about this with clients a lot. It's like, what are you attached to? What is going to bring you to peace, And so, like, I try to start out the relationship, if it's like they're coming to me first, it's like, what do you want to get out of this? What is your best case outcome? And I used to do that. I was taught to do that in public defense, because I would get so riled up and then get the client. Like I did this once. The guy had 14 charges, by the way. They all got dismissed, but I got him so worked up from the get-go, and there was legitimacy to some of those charges that when he got the best deal he was ever going to get, he hated my guts. And I'm like, I did that to myself. And so now I'm very cognizant. What is it that you want? Where do you want to go, right? And I think that's the most important, is that they are driving the bus, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Where do they want to end up? Maybe it's different than where I would want to end up, right? And that's what you're saying too, is that, yeah, you don't roll over, right? I mean, I walked away from stuff because it was worth it to me, but somebody else, if you've got kids, you can't be scrimping and saving while the other person's living high on the hog, right? No. There has to be equity there.
Right.
And I do think it's the lawyer's job to see that, find that, point that out to the person, and then the person can say, okay, well, this I can let go of, or this, I can't, right?
Absolutely. And clients sometimes make crazy choices.
Really?
So I had this client who was in a pretty messed up marriage, and then got divorced, and we fought for years and spent ungodly amounts of money and had lots of experts, and she was granted relocation to live in another state. And after that was all said and done, they worked out a deal. This guy had a lot of money, where he bought a house for her here and convinced her to move back here, and came up with a deal that, like, I never ever would have advised, because he's continuing to control her finances, but it was worth it to her. Now, and good for her.
Right. Well, it's interesting because Corey and I are really into past life stuff and astrology, tarot cards, psychics, and all that. And I do think some of that we can't understand from a logical perspective has to do with something else. There's something underlying between those two people that we're never going to understand or get to. I attribute that to past life stuff they need to work out.
Yep. And it is their relationship. There's a lot of relationships that we learn about, or I learn about, that I think is completely unhealthy and dangerous, and you should get out of that. And that's just, if that's not my call, and it's not always how they feel.
Interesting. So
yeah, interesting.
What do you do? Because it's the same, kind of off that kind of notion is, I know Tracy has talked to me about it a couple of times, where she just says sometimes people aren't very forthcoming with some of the details. So maybe in one perspective, you're like, oh, this needs to happen, or this needs to go this way. And then all of a sudden they disclose something to you. You're like, well, that would have been helpful 6 months ago to know this. Or maybe they're not even forthcoming about assets or previous inappropriate behavior, things that they've done, and they're sort of just not disclosing this to you, and then you don't have the full picture. I mean, what do you do when you run into those kinds of things with your clients?
I have not had this happen a whole lot. And I don't know why. I don't know if there's a way that you can, make it clear to them from the beginning that you're so 100% on their team that there's nothing that they could say that would be off limits. And so I think I've been lucky to have clients that are fairly forthcoming, but I've also had clients where they were hiding assets, and I didn't know about it. And the opposing counsel brought me, hey, look at this account and this truck and money. And I'm like, oh, and then my job is to go to the client and be like, we got to settle. Like, we don't get to take this in front of a judge. Like, you've been caught. I'm not, whatever.
Right.
I'm not scolding you, but our situation has changed.
Yep.
And that's the thing, that it is, we are officers of the court. We don't hide assets. We can't hide assets. I have had to let a client go because that person thought I was there to help them hide stuff, right? We cannot. And I think that's an understanding. I mean, people watch Breaking Bad, right? And the lawyer, Sal, is doing everything he can to hide everything for them. And that is not our job. And, it's interesting. I got in trouble in law school. I got yelled at during one of those fake, what do they call, like a moot court thing. because I was coming from the criminal world. I had been a cop, right? And if you had information, you didn't disclose it to the other side, not Brady stuff, but it was, that was stuff from the defense side. And so then we did a civil thing, and I'd never had done any civil stuff. And they're like, you can't hide anything. And I'm like, well, why would I tell you something that's bad about me? But you have to in civil, right? In civil and family, you have to disclose that stuff. And that's the thing is like, you don't get to hide stuff. Like, and Arizona is a community property state where we live. And so it's fairly 50-50. And that's something that's also a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. And I think the sooner they understand that and can get their head around that we're not hiding anything, we're not playing any games. I can't, as the lawyer, I don't have control to direct how this is going to go. And I'm not going to not hand over information. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. And clients, if you want to opt out of this process, if this process is so ugly and you can't handle it, you have to settle.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make a deal so good that you get out of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the options.
Mm-hmm.
We either have to do what the court and the law tells us to do, or you have to settle your case.
Well, and when you say settle, that means them coming up to an agreement. It's a voluntary agreement, whether you like it or not. Like you're signing it voluntarily, right? Whether you're like, oh, I could have gotten better. Well, there is that thing. Sometimes you just can't, or you do need to, or you don't want to be on the stand, right? Yeah. And I think that's. I just had a question. I forgot it. Corey asked a question. I'll think of it again.
Well, just to piggyback on that, or you don't want them to have the information. Like I have a client who owns a business and she doesn't want to disclose that information to calculate child support. Not an option.
I mean,
I don't have the option for you to not disclose what is in your business. So you got to come up with a number that he's going to agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And if you come up with a number, a child support number that he's cool with, then you don't have to disclose.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something. So when a client comes to a lawyer, right, this is a confidential relationship, and they need to just tell you everything.
Yes. We are paid to be on your side.
Mm-hmm.
We are on your side. Like you're never going to get a more loyal, like non-judgmental, on your team person than your lawyer. So give us everything. We're professional problem solvers.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So how long, I know that it really runs the gamut on how long divorces take. I mean, some people drag them out for years and years, and others are really short. What are some of the things that, if someone is more expeditiously looking to move through the process, what are some of the things that usually dictate that or help that move along? And what are the things that sort of drag it out?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, one thing that you talked about was the difference between the emotional processing of the relationship and the logistical processing, which might be legal or not legal, but it's the logistics.
Right.
If you can process the emotional piece, both of you, both people. So this never happens at once, right?
Right.
Hearts don't break even.
Right.
But if you can delay the logistics until the two of you have been separated for 2 years and you've both gotten to your new normal, and that's a very easy way to get divorced.
Right.
Now, the downside of that is you don't get the court to help you through the separation, and you might need that help. Okay, so you may not have that option, but that is a very judicious way of getting things done. Everybody's done with the relationship, and now we just need to get this stuff done. It really all comes down to conflict, but also complexity. If you have high complexity but low conflict, we can still do that pretty judiciously.
So like a lot of property, maybe some businesses, but if they're getting along, okay. Right.
If we can agree, and in those cases, what I like to do is can we agree in concept? Can we agree to a process? Can we agree that we need to get these things valued? Can we agree on a valuator? If we can agree to these things, we can carve a path forward. And then the best divorces are the walkaway divorces, where everybody's like, you take yours, I'll take mine. I'll take my debt. I'll take my income. I'll take my assets. I've kept them separately. And being a divorced woman who's now recoupled, I will never get married again. I will never.
Answer why we have this. Okay, I used to be super romantic, and but I mean, for most of my adult life, I couldn't get married because gay people were not allowed to be married, right? But then I did get married. Then I became a divorcee, and I'm like, oh, I still get married again. And then I started doing family law. I'm like, no, never. No one should get married.
And I told you early on, I was like,
I know.
I'm never getting married after I had to dissolve my domestic partnership. And we dissolved it like over a decade ago. And I'm like, I'm never getting married. And Tracy's like, you are not romantic at all. And I was like, oh, no.
I know. Now I'm on the same page.
Very, very aware of the legal binding contract of marriage.
Yeah. Tell us why, Billie, because you not only are recoupled, but you also have his kids living at your house and have like 7 kids in your house, right? Yeah. So why wouldn't you marry? Why not get married again? Does he know? I'm going to tell him. I'm going to slap him. Oh, no, he
absolutely knows. He absolutely knows. The process of getting divorced is brutal. It's just brutal.
Yeah.
And expensive and long and hard. And we're adults. We're big kids. We didn't, I kind of get it when you're young and you're building a life together and you're going to buy houses together and you're going to have kids together, and like, I get it. I understand why marriage at that point is important. But you get to be my age and there's just no upsides.
Well, you're quite young looking compared to like I'm not going to say us, but me in general. I mean, I'm about to be 55, right? So we did just speak to a friend of ours who actually, like, she's my age, I think a couple of years older than me. And now our considerations are different. Will we get married because somebody needs health care? Because, you know what I mean? Like, we're not to Medicare age yet. Do we need to take that into consideration? But doing so with a prenup or something like that.
Yeah.
To make it, if there is a divorce, to make it easier.
Yeah, let's say you really, really want to get married, and you are, you are financially independent. You have lived on your own. You don't want the risk of somebody really dragging you down, because that is a risk when you get married.
Yes.
A prenup is your next best option. Although you can always do a marriage without signing up for the court's parameters, right? And the law. You can always do the romantic vows, whatever you want.
Yeah, the love part, right?
But some of the practical stuff that you're talking about, like filing your taxes jointly, or I don't know, on my health insurance, I'm able to add my partner and his kids. But so really look at it, right? You're really making a practical analysis of what is this really? What is this marriage really? What do I get out of it? And does it make sense?
Well, I was talking about that. Also, I binged the season 8 of Love is Blind. I won't give any spoilers, but like, they brought up prenups, and the one person's family was like horrified. And it's like, okay, you just met each other. Why on earth is not everybody on the show doing a prenup? I mean, anybody should. Like, I don't know if I thought my marriage would end in divorce ever. I mean, it was very like, emotional. Like, I was in perimenopause. I acted like a crazy person, like, freaking out all the time. But like, it ended very peacefully, right? But had we had a prenup, like, I just don't get it. People act like a prenup is some kind of like buzz killer, romance killer.
Right, where it's actually like the most respectful thing you can possibly do. I want to protect your rights in the future and my rights in the future. And how do we have big adult, grown-up, mature conversations about how we might want to do that? But the culture surrounding marriage is something that can be analyzed for a long time. All the
good. We'll have you on. Exactly. We'll have you on another podcast about marriage, and it's true. It is. It's very interesting because it costs I looked the other day. It costs $98 to get the marriage license, right, in Arizona, in Pima County, and I'm like, wow, look at the average of what clients are spending to get divorced. Even when it's not extremely contentious, but then the really contentious ones, and I spent $28,000 in 1996. Like, I'm like, I would have rather handed her a check for $20,000. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we never went to mediation. It went right to the courts.
Really?
Yeah, it became a case of first impression. You can look it up in LexisNexis if you'd
Hmm.
like. Yes, it was pretty contentious and it was written up in the Seattle Chimes and all this stuff back then. And I would have handed her a check. I'd been voluntarily paying her spousal and child support for a year and a half before she took me to the cleaners. And she lost everything. And that's really sad for her because she lost all the support. And I paid a lawyer $28,000.
Yeah.
I mean, and as a lawyer, yes, we love to make money, sure. But I don't want to do it at the expense or when there's another option, right?
Right. We want to add value to your lives, I promise.
See, that's awesome.
It is
What
awesome.
a great statement for a divorce attorney to say. Can you tell us, like, before, I don't know if Corey has more questions, but, like, I want you to tell people about, like, what you've set up with the now it's not Modern Law University, but it's
the Navigator?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a program that is an online support group and online resources for people who are either representing themselves or just need more wraparound support. Let's say you have a lawyer, but you want all the courses. You want to know everything that's coming. You want to know how to prepare for trial, how to be the very best witness. You can join our program for $30 a month. And it includes office hours with lawyers and law students and the ability to, like, if you are representing yourself, put your paperwork up and, talk about your strategy with other people. Like, it's a very cool program. And you can find that at navigator.mymodernlaw.com.
And that's and so laws are specific by state, right? So that anybody in the state of Arizona, not outside the Arizona, although they could use it modeling, right? If your laws are similar.
This program is open to everyone and
across the country.
Yes. And what we've found, it's very useful for everyone, no matter where you're at, because if I tell you this is what the factors are for spousal maintenance here in Arizona, go look up your factors. They exist. There's a counterpart. It doesn't even matter that the laws are different. You can still get so much coaching and value out of the program.
That's incredible.
I love that. And as an academic who loves information about things, I would totally.
Or you would join and
I would join even if I'm not getting
everything.
divorced, just because I would want to know how the whole process works.
Right. You do. She goes above and beyond, and she would be the person that would be driving her lawyer bananas because she'd be like, "What about this and what about this?" And I researched that, and then what about this? Yeah,
I know, but
you told me also on another thing.
You told me, Tracy, not to call, and I check in.
I know.
Because
she has a civil case that I got her the lawyer for that.
And I don't bother my lawyer, but I do ask questions.
I know,
and
you
it's
do
very
ask questions
because Tracy said to not do that.
Well, I know, because you'll drive her crazy. Well, that's it's a personal injury thing about her mom. Her mom passed away at the hands of a doctor, and she has a medical malpractice attorney. And so that is, it's just contingency, right? So the lawyer doesn't charge per hour, but in family law, they do charge per hour. But I'm like, Corey, don't drive that lawyer crazy because she's already putting so much of the job itself is so taxing, right? And it's like, okay, if you can find that information somewhere else and not be bugging your lawyer, I mean, I'll be offline for an hour and I have 25 emails, and it's like, if you did a little bit of looking up, and especially in family law or where you're paying by the hour, I think that's great. I think all of our clients should go right into that, right? Because you also need support of people who are going through the same thing.
100%. You have to. It's kind of like when you have a new baby, like you need to be friends with other people who have new babies because you're insufferable and it's taken over your life. And the same thing happens when you're going through a divorce. You need friends who are divorced or going through a divorce.
Absolutely. And yes, people who have children are insufferable. Just kidding. Only for a little while. My best friend said, "Let me know if I can become that person." And I was like, it's happening.
Oh, my goodness. Well, Billie, I'm just thrilled that we were able to get you on and have these really important conversations because I know our listeners are just craving information and, sometimes they want to know. A, what are the resources? And you provided a lot of really great insight. But B is that they're not alone, right? Like that's really the crux of our podcast is like, you're not alone going through this. Not only do you have support from people, but what you're feeling is not isolated to you. Like other people feel this way too. And we want to kind of validate the fact that, divorce can be obviously a very overwhelming, lengthy process. And there's a lot of emotions involved, but there are people to help, people like you, Billie, and, people like you, Tracy, that are out there to help.
Well, and there are caring lawyers, right? And also your lawyer is not a god. Like the lawyer, just like a doctor, doesn't know everything, right? And it's a partnership. And
Right.
You need to find somebody that you vibe with,
Maybe you do like speed dating for lawyers.
Well, but I mean, that's what we do. You do a consultation and then you talk during the consultation. You say, okay, yes or no. And I think that's money well worth spent. Like, you need to talk to a couple people. I mean, I have a therapist I've been with for 5 or 6 years, right? And that was like the 7th or 8th in my life that I'd been through. And the only other one I really liked was in college in the 90s. And then now this lady who I'll never give up. And I just go to, when I want to talk things over, right? I don't need to go to her every week like I did before, but now I just want, and that is the thing is like it is a relationship and you do need to, have gel or vibe or however you want to describe it. You need to at least like that person or believe that person has your best interests in mind.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like it is a relationship that has to be invested in by both people.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes clients are like, you work for me, jump. I told you
Right.
how high to jump.
Yeah.
And that's just not a good relationship. It's not going to lead to a good outcome. It means you need to find a different lawyer that you respect.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
100%. Well, everyone will respect you and the navigator. I love it. The navigator is awesome.
It is cool.
Well, amazing. I will make sure to put that in the show notes for everybody and information about modern law in case anybody wants to get in touch with you all. But Billie, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for taking the time to share, like I said, share your insights, share your validation with our listeners. And we really appreciate it so much. And for all of our listeners out there, until the next episode, go out there and rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.